This was more, and not drastically more, but I'd say if I had to put a number on it, I would say this was 45 to 49% a Superman movie, and it was 51 to 55% a Justice League kind of introduction slash origin movie, although not really origin. I'm not going through this article again because I don't need to, but I'm going to pull this up to make a point. James Gunn says Superman is an immigrant story about basic human kindness. Superman is not an immigrant story. It wasn't a story about an immigrant. James Gunn never said that in the interview. Nothing to do with what's in here. I'm not going to give away spoilers. I don't even know if that word was ever actually used, but no. So people have got a lot of unfortunate kind of misconceptions on this based on really, really bad media, deceptive media practices. And again, I'm not going to hold James Gunn faultless because he does tend to run his mouth and say stupid stuff. But he didn't say what he was accused of saying. We covered that Sunday. Superman was a fun movie, like I said in the beginning of the show. I did enjoy it. Overall, it had its problems. But the problems were outweighed by the entertainment value, in my opinion. Now, what I'll tell you about the movie is, without spoiling really much of anything, and you could probably tell from the previews, and this has been said quite a bit out there, and that is that there is a lot going on in this film. There are a lot of characters in this film. But the good news is the characters that are in this film are really all very likable and good. That's the upshot. The downshot is that they do take a lot of attention away from Superman in terms of screen presence, right? You've got Crypto the dog. You've got Mr. Terrific, who was terrific. I love the character. The Guy Gardner, Green Lantern, played by Nathan Fillion, was so good. I loved those two. Mr. Terrific and Green Lantern in this, I thought were great. I had a lot of fun watching them. They had a lot of fun on screen. This was more, and not drastically more, but I'd say if I had to put a number on it, I would say this was 45 to 49% a Superman movie, and it was 51 to 55% a Justice League kind of introduction slash origin movie, although not really origin. And that was one of the downfalls of it. Is the title of the movie is Superman, but there is a lot of screen time that is given to the larger universe. But the good thing is that larger universe was very entertaining. But I think if James Gunn had come out and said, this is Superman Justice League Origins or something like this to set the expectation, I think people might have a somewhat different attitude about what they saw. Because I can understand the frustration that Superman was, although he was definitely the focal character of this, he was definitely the character you got to know the best. And I will say that David Cornsweet, right here, I'll just pull up and use this as a picture. That guy right there, he is Boy Scout Superman. And I thought he did a really good job. I can tell you right now, the movie, I did not detect really an ounce of woke in this movie. I don't think that this film was overtly political. I think some of the writings about, like, again, James Gunn saying that one of the things he did say was that, hey, there's a 10-minute conversation in there about geopolitics between Clark and Lois, or Superman and Lois, whatever. Probably right at about 10 minutes. But I will say the scene played out. Those two characters played it out really well. And I don't think the political angle they put in there was overtly in your face of modern issues. Now, there's certainly some distinct parallels. There's no question about that. Earlier today, Chris Gore pointed out something that I think was very correct. And that is that this movie is not nearly as timeless as, say, the Christopher Reeve films. I don't think this movie is going to have that longevity because there's so much in the film that's related to current day. And that's not a bad thing for the box office. That's not necessarily a bad thing for the audience because it's not modern audience. It's not woke stuff. But, these two countries where Superman goes in right in the beginning, and this has been talked about, that I'm not leaking anything that isn't already out there, that hasn't already been shown in previews and trailers and discussed in articles. But, he stops this conflict between these two countries. And the big bad country is probably most closely related to Russia. And the other country looks like a Middle Eastern country, but you could maybe call it Ukraine. Or part of me thought, man, it's kind of like when Russia invaded Afghanistan in the 80s. Could be hearkened to that. But I don't think there was anything overt, in your face, middle finger. There was no Trump bad, mega bad. I didn't get any of that from this movie. Maybe I missed it. The best parts of Superman, I can tell you right now, I thought the on-screen chemistry between Clark and Lois, between Rachel and David, was very good. It's very real, very believable. I think the supporting cast was great. I think Nick Holt, who plays Lex Luthor, did a good job. And people have asked about, were they, is everybody crying in it and this kind of thing? Yeah. Yes and no. There's a scene in there where, I think, I'm trying to remember right, there's a tear shed from Superman, but I mean, he was in a lot of pain. I think it was in the scene. And again, I don't want to give too much away. It's another aspect that people complained about, which I understand. That was one of my issues as well. But I didn't take it as anything that was like, they weren't pussifying Superman. Put it that way. Luthor, people talked about that as well. I'm like, well, he was, really, really angry. And I thought everybody played it well. I don't want to nitpick on that stuff too much. Like I said, my biggest complaints for the film were the fact that there was a lot of focus that wasn't on Superman because James Gunn seemed to be trying to build an entire universe in one film. Like, we're not going from this is Captain America or this is Iron Man in 2008, 2009. This is, boom, kick the door open, and the first scene of the film is the scene that everybody has seen since 6 months ago, with Superman crashing in the snow and he's banged up, and Krypto comes up and, picks him up and drags him into the Fortress of Solitude, right? Everybody has seen those shots because they've been out for 6 months. That's the opening scene of the film. And it opens with 30 years ago, Superman crash landed on Earth. 3 years ago, this happened. 3 months ago, this happened. And it's like a scroll, like think Star Wars, but it's not actually scrolling. It just pops up on the screen. It's to catch you up. You're basically diving in the middle. And the last thing is 3 minutes ago, Superman lost his first fight. Boom, and he crashes in the snow. And that's how the movie starts. And again, a scene that everybody has seen. And a lot of people like Superman spends a lot of time kind of getting himself beat up in the movie. That is explained perfectly well by the end of the film. There is reason why it's happening, at least from the villain that he's facing in the beginning that puts him in that position. There's another scene that involves, as you can probably easily imagine, there's another scene in there that involves kryptonite being introduced. There was something that Chris Gore alluded to, and I see people, yes, Justice Gang. That's part of the joke. I think that's part of the James Gunn humor, is that you had Guy Gardner, Green Lantern, like they hadn't created the name. They have a shot of the Hall of Justice in there, okay? But they hadn't come up with a name for the crew yet, because it's just kind of in its early days. And he says, "Yeah, we're the Justice Gang," and everybody's like, "Oh God, that sucks." It's like everybody else telling Guy Gardner that, "Oh, don't, that name sucks, man." So that's why it's like, where they're going with it. It's going, but that's my point, is that I think this was some of the complaining with the movie, that some focus, it felt like a little bit more of an expansive, this wasn't a just dedicated to Superman film. And if you go in there thinking it's 100% Superman, you are going to be disappointed. I went in with I turned my brain off. I said, I'm going in with a blank slate. I'm really going to try for this one, because I reasonably want to give this movie an honest shot, because again, this is something brand new. Let's see what David Zaslav and James Gunn are going to come up with. And if it sucks and it's awful, I'll call it out. But I really had to go, boop, and look, you guys know me. For the last couple of weeks, I've been talking about how, man, this clip makes me nervous. This shot's making me nervous. All this stuff being said is making me nervous. I had to forcibly turn all that crap off in my brain last night, and I went with Renegade Jr. And I the credits rolled. I stayed for both. There are two. I will tell you, there are two post-credit scenes, neither of which is earth-shattering. But I remember as soon as the credits started rolling last night, my initial reaction was, I really had fun. This was a fun movie. It wasn't an outstanding movie. It wasn't the best movie ever. It wasn't better than Christopher Reeve. It wasn't the greatest Superman movie ever. It was just, as a movie, I felt like it was fun. Now, let me also say this one thing I forgot. Oh, I might have mentioned this at the beginning of the show. I am not a deep lore Superman guy. I am not a deep lore DC guy. Okay? And I want to make that abundantly clear. There are probably people in the chat. I know there's people out there like Gary, Nerdrotic. Apparently, he didn't like the movie at all. I respect that, and I understand it, because Gary is a super comic book nerd. Probably knows everything about Superman backwards, forwards, upside down, sideways, 7 ways to Sunday. Okay? And there's one particular thing in this movie that even I knew was like, oh, that's just wrong. I want y'all to see this. I thought Chris Gore absolutely nailed this. Okay. Chris said, and this was this morning at 11 a.m. my time central. And I saw this and I'm like, this is it. This is exactly what I was thinking. Chris says, great cast. David Cornsweet is a fantastic Superman, authentic and unapologetically comic book inspired, like a live action cartoon. Unfortunately, James Gunn's Superman feels like a recap video of season 1 of a Superman TV series on HBO Max. This is a Gen Z Superman for the TikTok generation. Now, before you worry about what that means, like I said, it's not woke, and this is not what Chris is talking about. The hyper-fast pace is both a strength and a weakness, which I agree. Everything about the Superman is the polar opposite of Zack Snyder's darker, far more serious and epic vision. This is a terrible, lore-breaking story, or there is a terrible, lore-breaking story element involving Superman's Kryptonian heritage that was truly awful. I hope that it gets fixed somehow in a future film. That was the one thing that jumped out at me. I totally agree. But hang on, I'll get back to that. Superman will be divisive and create the kind of conversations I've had so many times in a comic book store. I have so many nitpicks, and strangely, I'm looking forward to seeing it again. It's also refreshing to see women allowed to be sexy in a modern Hollywood movie. Heels, skirts, cleavage. Kids and families will love their cleavage. No, he didn't say that. He said kids and family will love it. And he's right. The women in this movie were just women. They let them be hot. They let them be sexy. You know, Eve Tessmacher, and you had this other girl who's like one of the last shots of the movie. This girl is jumping up and down with just tits bounce. It was, I'm like, what? I'm like, where has this been in a superhero movie? Just old school, stupid, fun 80s, 90s kind of stuff. You know, before Disney decided to make every woman in the MCU more masculine. According to the, or at least as far as the lore breaking, what he says here. I'm going to talk about this. I don't consider this to be a major spoiler, but it is a spoiler. So if you don't want to hear what the lore breaking thing is, just hit mute, because I need to address this. So what he says here again is there is a terrible lore-breaking story element involving Superman's Kryptonian heritage that was truly awful. I hope that it gets fixed somehow in a future film. Let me talk about what that is. When I saw it, I actually turned to Renegade Jr. and was like, that ain't right. And he's seen the original, Donner films and stuff like, he's seen the original Superman stuff. Because I had just turned to him the moment before and said, that's Bradley Cooper, right? James Gunn's got all of his boys in here from Guardians of the Galaxy. I mean, even Palm Clementoff was one of the robot voices in this. Bradley Cooper was Jor-El, Rocket, right, from Guardians of the Galaxy. So Gunn brought over a lot of his Guardians people, which I thought was great. Even Alan Tudyk was in this as one of the robots. It was a lot of fun. In that first scene where Superman he lands in the snow, gets brought back into the Fortress of Solitude, it was in the trailer. They open up the wall, get the magnifying lenses on him, beam the sun into his chest, and heal him. While he's doing all that, they're like, do you want to listen to the message from your parents to calm you down? They turn it on. And it's the message from Jor-El and Superman's mom. And they're talking about exactly what you would expect. We're sending you to Earth because, you'll be the last of us. Our planet is dying. We want you to go to Earth. And we want you to, I can't remember exactly how they said it, but we want you to be our representative on the planet, be a good person, all this. Or the impression that Superman gets from it is his parents sent him to Earth to save the people of Earth, to be a force for good on Earth. The same thing we've all known about Superman, right, for decades and decades, the way it's always been. The message is corrupted at the end. It glitches out at a certain point. So he never knew what was in the rest of the message, and they were never able to recover it. One of the bad, evil characters that Lex Luthor has set up in this movie basically invades the Fortress of Solitude at one point. And there's a reason they're able to do it, which you find out at the end of the movie, which also explains why Superman was getting beat like a rag doll in the beginning, right? Because you look at it, you're going, this is weird. Why can this character? You find out, it's explained. Just trust me. But they go in and they retrieve this message. And a few scenes later, Lex Luthor, again, because part of his thing in this movie is to destroy Superman in the eyes of the public through social media and news and everything else. Lex Luthor manages to rip the message from the Fortress of Solitude, and then his AI is able to recover the rest of the message. And then he does a news press junket. They play the message, and the rest of the message is that the part that Superman never heard is that his parents are telling him, yeah, and once you get the people of Earth to trust you, they will be easy for you to rule over. Make them your slaves, and they will kneel before you because they're powerless to stop you. Basically turning Superman's parents into villains, which has never been, that's never happened. That was never Jor-El. Even I knew that, and I've never been a big fan of the comics, and even I knew that. My first reaction in that scene was, oh, he completely faked this. This is not, because this Superman's parents would never, ever, ever. This would be a lore-wrecking thing. Okay, here's the complaint. They never resolved this before the end of the film. They let it stand. And Superman is kind of dealing with this for the rest of the film. And you have Lex Luthor and Luthor Corp, and you have the U.S. government Department of Defense guys that are working with Luthor Corp. Oh yeah, we had it independently verified by whatever they said, like 30 different language experts and all this kind of stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, all right. Anyway, they let it stand. So the movie concludes with you still thinking that his parents are villains, and that sent Superman to Earth in this new version of Superman to conquer and rule. And even though Superman rejects it, it's like, well, I'm not doing that. The point is that I left the theater and I'm like, ooh, okay. But there's something in the back of my mind thinking that, again, this movie is the first movie of a lot of movies. This is just the beginning. They have a lot of room to go back and resolve this in a future movie. And that might be exactly what Gunn had intended, is to leave this out there as a big fat red herring. So anyway, again, without spoiling too much else, I think that was one of the big issues with this film, was doing what they did. I'm not convinced at this point that is going to stand. That's just my thoughts. And again, that's the most spoilery thing that I'm going to get into. Like I said, overall, I was entertained. I had a lot of fun, but saying I had fun didn't mean it was the best movie ever. Chris Gore makes a lot of good points. There's a lot going on in this movie, almost too much. They could have added another 15, 20 minutes just to give it a little bit more room, and I think it might have been better. I mean, I agree with Chris. It's not often I'm going to say make the movie longer, but this one needed to be probably a little bit longer. Superman is kind of lost, not completely, but he's definitely the character you get to know the most. But there's a lot of crypto in there. There's a lot of Mr. Terrific. There's a lot of Guy Gardner, Green Lantern. More than I would have liked in a movie called Superman, because I want the focus to be on Superman. But those characters, when they're on screen, are just fun as hell. They really are. I don't know how James Gunn kind of found that balance to make it fun. Like I said, it's far from being a perfect movie. And it's never going to replace Christopher Reeve and never replace that. But to David Corenswet's credit, I think he did a very good job.
Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.